Hello and welcome to the Future of Loyalty podcast with me, your host, Tom Peace. The Future of Loyalty are a series of informative and engaging podcasts with a laser focus on the emerging trends within the customer loyalty, engagement and CRM sector. I invite industry leaders and subject matter experts to discuss the future developments in customer strategy, and all our discussions are focused on where the industry is going next. Our discussions are fueled by a passion for new developments and innovations in the sector, and we aim for about 20 minutes, perfect for your coffee break, your lunchtime, or your journey home. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe at www.theloyaltypeople.global to get all our content direct to your inbox. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Ed Deason. Ed, please will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Tom, and hi, everybody watching. So Ed Deason, most recently head of customer experience at Wiggle Chain Reaction. So one of Europe's sort of biggest cycling, swimming, and running retailers until their unfortunate demise a few months ago. So there I was head of customer experience, so responsible for the operational contact center and also our strategic customer experience. Probably some of the more interesting projects I worked on there were around redeveloping their loyalty program and introducing some machine learning chatbots.
Amazing.
Before that, I was global head of customer experience at Pret. Probably a lot of people familiar with Pret out there. So the kind of food and coffee chain, primarily based in London. There, I was responsible again for the contact center and their customer experience. Probably the most interesting project I worked on there was Pret's coffee subscription. So the first coffee subscription on the UK high street, £20 and about as much coffee as you can drink.
Oh, it's up to £30 now.
I know it has increased since, isn't it? Yeah. So when we
Cost of
initially
living
rolled it out,
crisis. Yeah.
That's it. So when we initially rolled it out, £20 a month, all the coffee you can drink. Really interesting time to be doing that. We launched that sort of in the midst of COVID, really as a kind of a strategic ploy to get customers back into the shops as quickly as possible. It was phenomenally successful. I think we initially aimed for around 60,000 customers signing up in month one. I think we finished the month on around 220,000 signups.
Wow, that's a pretty incredible early recruitment rate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it made huge inroads in terms of sort of customer loyalty, repeat purchase rate from customers, and also sort of bringing a bit of a smile to people's faces in a pretty rubbish time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting one, that, isn't it? Because I was a member when I worked in London pre-COVID, and then became more of a member of the normal program after that when I couldn't get to the stores. But my understanding is that this has just been phenomenally successful for Pret. I know there were some teething problems around the fruit shakes, the fruit drinks,
Yep, that's right.
Supply of the raw materials. But actually, it seems to go from strength to strength, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that the reason Pret launched it at the time was 80% of their shops were in London. And London was probably the hardest hit city in terms of the pandemic. Even when people started, you were allowed to leave your house and start going out again, people were tending to head into their towns, into the local town they lived in, not so much going back into London. Most organizations weren't expecting people back in the office. Yeah. So whilst your local high street might have had a 70%, 80% footfall of what it was pre-COVID, London was still seeing only sort of 40% footfall. So even when people were coming back into London, they weren't coming back in huge swathes. So really Pret launched this as an attempt to, when people did start coming back into the city, to steal that footfall out from their competitors.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that one up, because it's a fascinating program, and I'm glad to see that it still goes from success to success. And the subscription-based model keeps to creep into the loyalty industry more and more. But we're not here to talk about loyalty specifically. We are here to talk about customer experience, which you are a key expert in. So tell us, what do you think are the key trends within the customer experience industry?
What's coming up, right? So possibly a controversial one here, but I'm going to say it.
We love controversy on this show. We love it.
I'm predicting the death of MPS in the not too distant future. So my view is that NPS is a metric whose time has passed a little bit. It was a pretty average metric at the best of times, but had very good PR. And I think ultimately we're in a place where organizations have more data about their customers, more information about their customers. They're able to sort of channel deeper insights, and NPS is kind of a bit one-dimensional. Don't get me wrong, it's played its part in getting customer experience into the boardroom, right? With CEOs and COOs talking about, asking what's our NPS score. But with the wealth of information that's out there, the wealth of data on our customers out there at the moment, NPS is kind of like I said, a bit one-dimensional, a bit of a metric of the past, I think.
Yeah, I think we'd absolutely agree. A lot of brands use NPS as a measure of customer satisfaction and even a measure of the loyalty program success. And it's not for us in isolation. We're not saying don't use NPS. What we tell our clients is use NPS in kind of alignment with a bunch of other measures, because you're quite right. There's a lot of other metrics available. So what would you recommend people use as well or instead of?
I think as with everything, the answer is probably it depends. So there are some organizations at the moment doing really interesting things in terms of understanding customer intent. So as a kind of a predictive tool. So right, a customer's on your website, and some of these tools measure, okay, what is the customer doing? How much time are they spending here, and here? How much time are they spending looking at these different areas? And what does that indicate about their intent? What's that telling you about whether they want to make a purchase, right? So historically, if you think about e-commerce, if a customer's on your PDP, your product description page, the inherent kind of assumption is, oh, they're trying to buy from you.
Yeah.
Actually, but a customer might be on your PDP because they're interested in the details of a product they've already bought. They're trying to find the specification of it, or they're trying to compare it to something else. So the organizations or the people that are doing this really well are looking at how a customer's behaving in the moment. NPS is a kind of looks in the past, right? How was that experience? The great organizations are going, what's the experience the customers are having right this second?
Yeah.
And how can we provide them with the tools and the information that they need to make a purchase, or to enable them to complete that task? So I'd say on one hand, there's that kind of, what are they doing right now? And then if you want to see, okay, if you want to talk about metrics looking at kind of how customers did behave, I don't think there's one specific metric. You sort of called it out. You said don't use NPS in isolation. And I think my recommendation for organizations would be look at all of the data points you're connecting from your customers, right? When did they purchase? How did they purchase? How frequently did they purchase? What did they do when they were purchasing? What interactions have they had with your organization? And then, keep measuring that and understand, right, okay, well, the next time, when did the customer next purchase from you? Yeah. And next purchase and next purchase. And how does that correlate? What's the strength of relationship with these things that happened previously?
Yeah. Right.
It requires a bit more sort of nuance, and it requires a fairly good understanding of data and how to connect different elements from experience. But NPS simply says, how likely would you be to recommend, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about this, I think, when we first caught up. If you sell hemorrhoid cream, this is my go-to example. If you sell hemorrhoid cream, probably no one's going to be saying that they're likely to recommend, right? Yeah. But actually, they might be very loyal customers. Yeah, and so you need to understand. You need to use the data you've got to understand, right? How frequently are people purchasing? What interactions are they having? What does that indicate about their future propensity to purchase?
Yeah, I think those interactions are key, aren't they? We always talk about, is there ways that you can collect data from your customer service team, or ask them how the process was immediately after purchase, etc. There's lots of ways that you can collect data on a particular journey, if you like, customer journey, that can then be fed into your overall planning and your customer service and your loyalty program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe an example. So an example from somewhere I've worked previously is we had a look at the couriers that customers were having their products delivered by, right? Because we used a variety of couriers, and one of the things we found was there was a particular courier, and if we used that particular courier, we saw that customer repeat rates dropped by 3%.
Really?
Yeah, and that was costing us about 3 million in revenue. 4 million in revenue a year.
Wow.
Right. And so MPS wouldn't have told us that. MPS might have said they don't like that courier, right? But it wasn't until we tied together, right, we've used this courier, we've seen a drop off in repeat purchase rates, and we've then tied that in with customer spend. And now we can see this is what that's looking like. So this is when I say, MPS is very one-dimensional. Use all of the data points. You talked about it. Use customer service data. Absolutely. Also use your web data. Use your visit data, the amount of time they're spending on your website. Use all of the different pieces of information you're collecting from your customers. Get it into one place and start drawing connections between it.
Yeah, got it. And you're a real kind of expert bringing together the customer experience and the loyalty, because I understand you've got an MBA in loyalty aligned to your customer experience.
That's right. Yeah. So I completed my MBA, oh gosh, probably about 8 years ago. And at the time, I wrote my dissertation on loyalty programs. Yeah. So I've got sort of, if you like, I've got the practical experience of working in customer experience for the last 20 years and the theoretical experience of writing a very long piece of work and doing lots of research on loyalty programs. Yeah.
Excellent. So with all that knowledge and all that experience, tell us, who's really getting this right, do you think?
Okay, so I think this probably brings me nicely onto the kind of the second of those trends, which is, and I'll answer the question as well, but around the kind of what I see as the widening gap between those organizations that are providing great customer experiences and those kind of organizations that are lost in the middle a little bit. So we were talking about this just before we sort of came on air, and what I'm certainly seeing now is two kind of splits in terms of those organizations that are providing great customer experiences. You've got the big organizations, the Amazons of this world, right, who are really investing hard in customer experience and really focused on making that experience as convenient as possible for their customers. So get the customer on the page, get them finding the products as quickly as possible, get them buying it, get them out. Yeah. And on the other hand, you've got great customer experience being provided by the kind of the SMEs of this world, the smaller organizations who really understand that actually the closer they can be to kind of deliver that sole trader experience, that really kind of personalized experience. So the example I gave was my barber, right? He knows exactly what haircut I want. He knows what products I use. He knows what I like to talk about when I'm in the barber's chair. And the organizations that are doing a really good job of this are the smaller ones who are replicating that really personalized experience. And then kind of you've got trapped in the middle this kind of amorphous blob of organizations who aren't really doing one or the other particularly well. And all you're seeing is this gap widening. You're seeing those big organizations investing more heavily and making bigger and bigger inroads into convenience, and these other organizations getting better and better at providing really, really personal experiences, and this blob in the middle who aren't really doing either.
Yeah, right. I sort of hear you. Yeah, there's a lot in that middle ground. There's a lot of kind of homogenized, similar programs, and it's tough in that space, I think, to break out. But how do they break out? How do they excel? Give us an example of where you think this is done really well.
Yeah. So coming back to that, so I think I mentioned them. I name dropped already, but I think Amazon would be my go-to on this, right? And perhaps it seems a bit trite, but what they are doing is absolutely doubling down on that convenience piece, right? They are totally focused on making it as easy as possible to buy from them, to the point, and I said this earlier, they've almost ruined e-commerce for a lot of people, right? If I'm buying something online now, I expect it to be delivered next day. I don't expect to pay for that.
Yeah.
Right. I expect to be able to buy it in one click. I expect to be able to find it in 2 seconds, right? All of these things because I've spent so much time on Amazon. Amazon has really kind of defined that shopping experience for me. And now I'm at that point where if I have to go to another website because Amazon doesn't stock it for whatever reason, I'm annoyed when I have to enter my credit card details. I'm annoyed when I have to sign up for an account. I'm annoyed when I have to wait 6 days for it to turn up.
Or pay for postage and packaging. Yeah,
or pay for P&P. Yeah, absolutely.
I've just ordered something I couldn't get on Amazon, and I had to pay £7 to have it delivered, and it wasn't even next day. And you're just like, oh, our paradigm around that has been just reset by Amazon, really, hasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is that point, when the Amazons of this world become the kind of the benchmark, those organizations that don't invest, those organizations that are stuck in the middle, just drift further and further away and become, as a result, they're less enjoyable to purchase from. And as a result, people are driven more to the Amazons of this world.
Yeah, absolutely. So got it. So anybody in that middle space or anyone in an SME, all they need to do is have the budgetary capacity of Jeff Bezos, and they'll be fine.
That's a very glib response. Yeah.
Well, but to be serious about that, though, there are a lot of, I think you start at the bottom end, right? You start by being personal, and then you create the element, the scaled personalization and the convenience from there. And there are lots of tools out there, and at not that high of a cost. So it is possible to do it, but you've got to kind of know where you're going, right? You've got to have a vision and be clear, and really invest as well as you can in creating that customer experience. But as a loyalty expert, maybe not a customer experience expert, but what I would say about that is that the two things are inextricably linked and becoming closer and closer all the time. People, it's not enough anymore just for the rational value element of a loyalty program. You've got to have the experience as well. So if the customer experience is not good, then bolting some sort of loyalty reward or rational benefit on top of that isn't going to help. So actually the two things are becoming more difficult to separate all the time.
And actually that was, to talk about the theory side of things a little bit, and talking, harking back to my dissertation days, the fundamental underlying kind of elements of customer loyalty were customer satisfaction, commitment, and trust, right? And with satisfaction being the most important one. And you absolutely called it out there, right? If customers aren't satisfied with your broader experience, right, there's no point trying to bolt a loyalty program on top of it. You've got to get the customer experience right in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So how do brands attempt to do that? So one of the big trends in that I think is kind of merging the two industries, they're called not industries, are they, but two approaches, the customer experience and the loyalty industry, is of course AI. Obviously, I can't do a podcast at the minute without mentioning AI. If nobody's noticed, AI is going to change everything. So how is it going to change the customer experience outreach of a brand?
Yeah, absolutely. We can't talk about future trends without talking about AI, can we? It's hardly worth doing a podcast otherwise, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the role of AI in customer experience, I mean, it's a pretty broad one. I think in terms of looking ahead or kind of understanding the trends at the moment, I think the biggest one for me is really this kind of organizations focusing on the kind of the chat element, the chat GPT, that kind of halo product, if you like. And don't get me wrong for a second, but I use chat GPT all the time. I think it is the most incredible piece of technology that I think I've ever seen at this point. But what organizations are doing with it is not quite right at the moment. So what we're seeing is organizations essentially almost connecting chat GPT or similar tools up to their chatbots, right? And a couple of examples. So there was an airline recently that connected a GPT tool up to their chatbot, told a customer that he could have a refund on his ticket when he absolutely couldn't, so that the chatbot hallucinated, and the customer took them to court and subsequently won. Because
that is a representation of the brand, right?
That's it. Absolutely. Yeah. Doesn't matter that whether it was a person or a piece of code. It told him he could have a refund when he couldn't. Equally, one particularly enterprising customer of a courier company recently started talking with their chatbot, realized he could probably jailbreak it without too much effort, and got it to start swearing at him. And again, made the national press with that. And
good for him.
And it was very entertaining. It was great. It was great content. But what we're seeing is these organizations jumping a little ahead. That putting this, using AI where it's probably not quite ready yet, right?
Yeah.
Where it unfortunately runs the risk of hallucinating or having bad actors take different approaches with it. And what we're maybe not seeing enough of organizations doing is using AI right now at what it's really, really good at, which is trawling through big data sets, drawing connections where humans might have problems drawing those connections, really summarizing huge pools of free text information that customers might have entered. That's where AI is absolutely phenomenal, where it can tell you what's important to your customers, why it's important to your customers, how certain interactions early on in their process might change the buying outcomes of those customers, helping you model what are the 3, 4, 5 most important things your organization can do to improve repeat purchase, to improve margins. That's where AI is incredibly strong at the moment. And that's probably what we're not seeing organizations talk enough about at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is the obvious approach within the loyalty industry. We've had machine learning for years and years. It's developing into generative and predictive AI for spotting triggers and learning about a customer and gathering more data than we could before and learning more and more, and that's great. But I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit, and I'll tell you why. The AI solution within customer service. So I presented a conference recently in Dubai, and I presented with my good friend and colleague Sebastian Hirschner from Aer Lingus. And he was saying that actually the AI that they have in the customer experience or the customer service function is getting so much better that it will automatically solve some of the more basic problems, which frees up the queuing time for the more complex questions so people can flow through to actually speak to a person and an expert more quickly because AI is taking some of the more simple, my flight's been cancelled, here's some different flights you can pick from, can solve some of those problems. And actually it got me sort of thinking, do you know what, maybe there is a solution within AI for customer service, because like you, I kind of feel like it's not quite there in customer service, but I don't think it's very far off at all. I think it's approaching the point where it's being more and more useful within the customer service environment. Would you agree, or are you thinking it's still a way off, or is it nearly there, or where are you on this particular journey?
No, look, I don't think we disagree at all, actually. So I've implemented chatbots myself, particularly sort of ML chatbots, where you're absolutely right. Where they are most useful is taking away those interactions that don't add value for the customer or for the agent. Right, that's where they're super useful. So if you've got a really standardized process, this is how you get a refund, this is how you get a return, this is how you process a warranty claim, that's where kind of a little bit of machine learning, a little bit of AI goes a long way. That's really effective, right? Because there's a fairly simple band of questions that a customer's going to ask, and a solution can answer those. And that's where it's useful. Where it's not adding as much value at the moment is the really personalized piece. When you want to speak to a customer, when you want a piece of specific personalized advice, when you want to understand what are the limits of a particular product, for example, what are the best ways that you can do X, Y, and Z. Those are the kind of things where you want to be speaking to a customer. When you want to be speaking to a human. And that's where it adds the most value. And in terms of how far away are we from AI being able to do most of that? I think we're pretty close, right? What I think my caveat is we're not there right now, and so we see some of these early leaders maybe making slightly misguided choices when implementing it, but we're not far away. We're not far away.
Yeah, and we've got to go for it, right? Because we've got to train the AI. So someone's going to have to take the lead.
That's it. Someone's got to do it, right?
And it feels like the airlines is a good space to do that. So good luck to them. We'll learn from them. We'll pick up their advice, and maybe it'll roll out to some of the other sectors. Well, look, that's been fascinating. Some really, really interesting topics there. We talked about the death of NPS. I think that's quite fascinating. I think you're probably right, but I think brands can't just kill off NPS. They need to use other metrics instead, which you talked about, some of the kind of CSAT data, the intention data, etc. Maybe use it with NPS at the same time, just to give the board confidence. We also talked about the gap to good, if you like, within the customer service, and where there's kind of two ends to a scale, and the people that kind of get stuck in the middle, and how difficult it can be for those guys to create really strong customer experience. And then, of course, we talked about AI and what influence that is having on customer experience, but also the loyalty industry and how that's coming together. So thank you very much for your expertise. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on, Ed. Thanks very much for your time. Over to you just to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I hope it was interesting.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on. Maybe we'll catch up again soon on a more in-depth conversation on the topic. But thank you everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you again soon.